No position is talked about more in the NFL draft conversation or the NFL than quarterback. Today, we're going to talk about quarterback in the 2025 NFL draft class. I'm Cody Carpentier with the Draft Rankings Show. I appreciate you all for tapping in here on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast, please leave a 5-star review. We finally got the podcast up, dialed in. It's cooking. Wherever you get your podcast, go find it. Pod.link. You can go find the Spotify, Apple, whatever it is. We appreciate you. And if you're on YouTube, please click that like button. Please click subscribe. And also, we got 70 days until the 2025 NFL draft, exactly 10 weeks from today. If you do have any questions or show topics, please remember to drop them in the comments here on YouTube. Or if you are over on the draftrankings.com and you are subscribed, you can drop it in the mailbag section as well. Quarterbacks. That's the conversation I want to talk about today. Last year's quarterback class, everybody knows how elite it was. We saw Caleb Williams go off the board, number 1 overall to the Bears. Jaden Daniels, 2 to the Commanders. He wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. Drake May goes off 3 to the Patriots. 1, 2, 3 for quarterback. You will not see that in 2025. Michael Penix was a surprise selection to the Falcons at 8. We had J.J. McCarthy at 10, and we had Bo Nix at 12. That's 6 quarterbacks going off in round 1 in the top 12. The year before, of course, we had Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and Anthony Richardson, each in the top 5. But do you remember the 2022 draft class with Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, Matt Corral, Sam Howell? That year, there was a lot of conversation about quarterbacks going in the early part of the draft. Mainly, this was surrounding around Malik Willis. I was part of the conversation. I was projecting quarterbacks. There's the guys like Shedeur Sanders that you know what you got. He's not an elite athlete. He's a pocket passer. And you have the projection type. There's more types, but these are the main 2 types, right? The projection type, the Mahomes, the Anthony Richardson, the Cam Ward, the Malik Willis projections, big arms, athletic. Not quite sure exactly what you're going to get, but you can see traits. That is where the Malik Willis thing came in. That's where the Trey Lance thing came in the year before that when he went 3rd overall. Back to back to back, right? So we had in 2021, we had 1, 2, 3 for quarterbacks. This last year, we had 1, 2, 3. 2023, we had 1, 2, 4. This year, I'm afraid we're not going to see that at the quarterback position. If you look at the current ADP for these quarterbacks or for the players overall, I guess, in the draft, Cam Ward's currently projected as the 1st overall player off the board. Number 4 is Shedeur Sanders, and then there's a mild drop-off down to 39, where we see the 3rd quarterback enter the conversation at Jaxson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers are also there. Jalen Milroe from Alabama, Quinn Ewers from Texas. Those are your main 5 in conversation. Quinn's ADP is at 63. 4 of those guys have peaked into the top 15 through the draft process. Jaxson Dart's one that has not peaked. He has not quite crested into round 1 as far as the overall ADP projections. But if you do click on Jaxson Dart over in the NFL mock draft database, it'll show you that over the course of the last couple of weeks, we've seen mocks. Brett Whitefield from Fantasy Points mocked Jaxson Dart 6th overall to the Raiders. Kyle Krabs from the 33rd team mocked him to the Steelers at 21. Chad Reuter from NFL.com mocked him 31 to the Jets. A lot of well-known people in the space have mocked Jaxson Dart inside of round 1. Does that happen? That's the conversation needs to be had around the quarterback position and how we should diagnose what that means for the 2025 NFL draft and the 2026 NFL draft. You look at the 2026 class in comparison to this 2025 class, will teams maybe take the scenic route to get their quarterback? You see a team like the Tennessee Titans that have cut their GM, dropped their coach, cut their GM, and Brian Callahan's there. And the thought is that they will go out and draft Cam Ward number 1 overall. But there's also thought that they'll maybe trade down to 3. And maybe that's exactly what they want. They want to move down to 3. And what happens if it goes quarterback, and they end up going edge? What happens if the Tennessee Titans go out and sign Aaron Rodgers? And that defers Tennessee from the 2025 class to the 2026 class. The 2026 class currently projects to, of course, feature Arch Manning. However, if you follow the Texas Longhorns, Arch Manning's conversation is much more towards 2027. Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee Lenore Sellers, 2026. Drew Aller from Penn State, 2026. What do all these guys have in common? They're all projected quarterbacks, projection quarterbacks. Nico, more of a pocket passer, but he's still 6'5", 215 pounds. Drew Aller, 6'5", 240 pounds. Lenore Sellers, 6'2", 230 pounds, running quarterback. Carson Beck, who in the 2025 class was once looked at as a top 5 pick, currently at Miami. Can he kind of fix that draft capital and jump back up into the top 5? Garrett Nussmeier, a lot of people thought if he came out in this class, he might be a top 20 pick based on projection. A lot of good quarterbacks in that next year's class, but we're not in 2026 yet. We're in 2025. And I think that the thing we need to find out, and we're going to find out in about a week and a half when we're live in Indianapolis, we will be boots on the ground, sitting in Lucas Oil Stadium, watching these quarterbacks compete against one another. What quarterbacks will vault themselves into round 1 or tank their draft stock? When you look at the quarterbacks in the 2025 NFL draft cycle, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders have always been the top of the heap. But lately, there's been this conversation, I talked about Jaxson Dart a second ago, where Jaxson Dart has entered the fray against Shedeur Sanders for quarterback 2. I'll be quite honest, I was down there at the Senior Bowl. I was live, boots on the ground at the Shrine Bowl. I was not the most impressed with the Jaxson Dart performance at the Senior Bowl. Dart was fine, but I'm sitting there next to Alex Dunlap from RosterWatch.com, Theo Greminger from Player Profiler, Brett Whitefield from Fantasy Points, Thor Nystrom from Fantasy Life, Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros, all these different guys from the space. And we're like waiting for Jaxson Dart to prove it. Take the deep ball down the field. Make the big play. And he didn't. The one play he did make down the right sideline was an underthrow that the receiver, I think it was Jack Besh, had to come back and make a play on, or maybe it was Isaac Tesla from Arkansas. You can come back and make a play on it. I think Dart is fine. But to project Dart for me into the top 15, it's a no-go. He does not belong in there. Shedeur Sanders, I do think is a lock to be in the top 10. Cam Ward is a lock to be in the top 3. And I'm talking through this because, of course, everybody knows this show is sub 10 minutes. So we're getting towards our marker. We're going to talk about the quarterback position a lot over the course of the next 70 days. But I'm trying to take a top-down, 10,000 foot view of this quarterback class. Jalen Milroe had a down week at the Senior Bowl. We have not seen the Milroe kind of dump. He's just sitting there in the second round, which is where he was viewed by NFL teams entering the draft cycle. When we do show up in Indianapolis, there's one quarterback that many are assuming is going to have maybe his best showing of the cycle at this time. The combine throwing sessions and pro day throwing sessions. He was once the number 1 quarterback in the nation. He has not been mocked. He's been mocked once inside the first round in the last month and a half. Quinn Ewers. That's the wild card at the quarterback position. We know what he was during the season. He wasn't quite the answer. He played injured all year, an oblique tear or strupper strain. He had an ankle injury that was pretty severe for a couple of weeks. They had some revolutionary technology they used for a brace. I think he's a wild card. Will Howard, sort of a wild card as well at the quarterback position. But all these guys have the same thing in common, whether it's Jaxson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers, Will Howard from Ohio State, Dylan Gabriel from Oregon. None of them are first-round talents or should be talked about in true first-round conversation. But if they are top 40, they may end up being in round 1 because NFL teams like to get that 5th year and like to get that extra. They like to move up to get their guys so they don't miss out. The bottom line is this is not the same quarterback class that we saw last year, not the same quarterback class we saw in 23, not the same class we saw in 21. It's much closer to that 2022 class with Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, Matt Corral, and Sam Howell. I'm Cody Carpentier from the Draft Ranking Show. I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. Click the like button, click subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.